What this speaks to are the ethics, the values, and the character of the wolves being opposite that of the sheep. What this speaks to is the fact that there are people in your vineyard, in your community, in your country, whose ethics, values, and character are opposite of yours. How did the Indians get this land taken from them? It's because they ran into people whose ethics and values and character were the opposite of theirs. They ran into wolves. Wolves from another continent who were fleeing that continent because the wolves in that continent were after them. And so what they did is that they took advantage, and now the Indians have an area, a geographic area. The Native Americans have a geographic area. What Jesus is talking about is that these wolves are like hypocrites. They're like antichrists. They're opposite of who God wants people to be. What did Jesus say the two greatest commandments were? What was the first one?
To love the Lord with all your heart, soul, and
to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. That was the first one, which means you got to have a true respect for the Lord and the Lord's way. And what was the second?
Love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. And he says, on these two hang all the law and the prophets. So everything from Old Testament to New Testament hangs on these two. But if everybody operated this way, would there be predators? Would there be a need for predators? Would there be a need for people who are persistently trying to eradicate others? Would there be a need for people to have different ethics and values and character to the point to where they want to destroy others, do harm to others? See, when you choose to want to do harm to others, when you choose to don't look at other people as having the same rights that you have, when you choose to look at people who you believe that are inferior to you, when you choose to start thinking that way and living that way, you then cross this boundary from moving from a sheep to a wolf. Many people will be killed or destroyed because of deliberate suggestions, thoughts, ideas, continuously being imposed upon the people by wicked factions in your world. Deliberate suggestions, thoughts, ideas, continuously being imposed upon people by wicked factions in your vineyard, in your community. Jesus said in this passage, I need you guys to be alert as you live your life in a community each day with these wolves. And you're living your life in that community with other sheep. That's what he's talking about here. But what he's also acknowledging is that many will be asleep because of these deliberate suggestions. In other words, it'll be like they are living, but they're under a spell. It'll be like they're living, but they're choosing to live in a way, they're making decisions that even contradict common sense for themselves. It's like they are in a trance. They are saying things and doing things that don't make sense. And so what we have to recognize is that these things happen as a result of deliberate suggestions continuously being imposed upon people. But Why are they being imposed upon people? They're being imposed upon people who have values and ethics and character of predators. They don't view everybody as being the same. They don't view everybody as being capable. They don't view everybody as having the opportunity or want everybody to have the opportunity because they want to have the opportunity more than others. It's greed. The Lord wants us to be aware and responsible citizens who are thriving, shining light. Shining light for Him where He's planted us in the community, where He's planted us in the vineyard. Wherever we are, no matter what age we are, the Lord wants us to be shining lights for Him, fulfilling those two commandments. But when a person chooses not to acknowledge those two commandments, they are acknowledging something. When they choose to acknowledge something else other than those two commandments, that means that they are at odds with God's reality. When a person chooses to treat certain groups of people in the same community that they live in unfairly, that means that they're doing something that contradicts a relationship with God. And another thing about these wolves don't care about the people so much so that they'll even pretend to be a sheep. Have you heard of the little kid story called Little Red Riding Hood? Today we're going to learn about the effect suggestions have on people's lives, an important role that response expectancies play. What are response expectancies? It's the way in which we anticipate responses in various situations. Response expectancies are ideas or thoughts that have been placed before you with the intention of having you to respond a certain way, with the intent of having you to have a desired, it's a purposeful endeavor to have you respond a certain way. I'm going to give you an example. The Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws were put in place with the intention of having a certain group of people respond a certain way. It was put in place with the intention of having a certain group of people to have a certain perspective, for worse, for them. But if you happen to be, and that group of people happen to have been black people, but if you happen to have been white, same age as a black child, those laws were put into place to do the same for you. Not for worse, but for what? For your good. They were put in place to submit you in your mind that you are what? You are better. So those deliberate expectations by putting those laws out there, the response expectations was that people would automatically respond in that manner. So black people couldn't do what when they were walking on the sidewalk near a white person? Come on, what's the truth? What was the truth? The black people couldn't do what when they were walking on the sidewalk with the white person? They couldn't look at them. They could not look at them. Does that make sense? No. But was that a law? Yes. Reason being is because of the deliberate suggestions were intended to make people automatically come to a conclusion in their mind, to make them automatically come to a conclusion about who they were in society, to make them automatically come to a conclusion that they were inferior. And if you were on the other side, it was intended to make you believe that you were superior. IBM. IBM had a reputation that everybody who worked for them, they had to have a certain look. They had to wear certain had to have certain clothes that they wore. This was an IBM from a period of years ago. And that look, basically, if you didn't have that look, then you couldn't expect to be a part of that company. I can tell you what that company did not have, especially in the early years of its existence. It did not have diversity in any of its leadership. It did not have diversity in any of its roles across the company. What I'm trying to get you to see and understand, it wasn't by accident. It was a deliberate suggestion being made. Deliberate suggestion being made by everybody in the community? No, it's not everybody in the community that was thinking this way. But it was a lot of people. Recently, people say, well, why did so many people vote for somebody who did not like a lot of people? There is a reason. Deliberate suggestions cause people to think this way. Deliberate suggestions of what people feel are right and wrong, or what they believe is inherently only what they should have. Greed is what caused that. Because those same people, if I were a betting man, I would venture to say that some of those people who sided with that kind of thinking, that a person who treats people that in a negative way, if you're not like them, those people could be sitting in a church that you attend, or they could be sitting in a church that's down the street from where you might drive by. They could be going to church every day or every time the doors are open, yet having this thought process, which means that the thought process is still not fulfilling those two commandments. Loving the Lord thy God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul, and loving thy neighbor as thyself. In other words, treating people the way that you want to be treated. They're forgetting that part. Why are they forgetting that part? Because of greed. Deliberate, the notion of somebody might have something more than me, so therefore I am going to throw stumbling blocks in their path so that they will not ascend higher than me. This is the environment the Lord was talking about when he said, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. People who've made a decision to choose to live in a way that doesn't fulfill those two commandments. Sheep and wolves have different ethics and values and character. We are living in a society today where we have sheep. What's on display? Sheep and wolves. But the trick part about it is that Little Red Riding Hood story. I'll come back to that in a moment. Because many of the wolves, in order to survive, they've taken on the notion of cloaking themselves as sheep. See, these response expectancies, and that's what we're talking about, those things that I talked about earlier, those response expectancies set us up for automatic responses that actively influence how we get to the outcome that we expect. If you've ever saw something or ever been a part of something, and you look at its history, and you see that its history has been biased toward a particular group of people, and you may have thought to yourself, I guess I'll never be able to get into that, or I'll never be able to run that, or I'll never be able to own that, I'll never be able to be the leader of that. If you ever put a cap on yourself, it's because of deliberate suggestions that were put in place. The expectation is for you not to aspire to be, because it's being inferred that you are incapable. You don't believe me? If you can find one of these distinguished gentlemen, ask them the same question. They were known as Tuskegee Airmen. Ask them the same question and see what they say. The automatic response was to infer that it is that black people were incapable of being pilots. That was the automatic response. And what message was being sent by doing that? Basically, that all the pilots up until that point were what? What were they? They were white males. They were nothing but white males. Did it have to be that way? No. It was deliberately suggested that white males were the only ones capable of doing it. And even there were many who tried to, in the education community, try to scientifically say why this was the case. And every reason used was a lie. Now, but what did emerge out of the Tuskegee Airmen experiment? What did emerge? Truth. And what was the truth?
That black people can fly, that's the word of what?
If not better. And their record for that period of time proved it. Even in the face of all of the adversity, all the stumbling blocks that were placed in front of them. But the deliberate suggestion was that it was not possible. And I'm not just talking about this was just being something done at a college level or university level. This was being touted even up to people in offices of the federal government, in the military. What I'm trying to get you to see, these deliberate suggestions were intended to give people the perspective that they were incapable, and to accept that as being the limit of which that they could expect to aspire. And but for others who were on the other side, to see themselves as being those who should expect to ascend, even if they didn't have the ability.
For example, this week, the Major League Baseball acknowledged the middle league. They should be a part of the majors, not the minor league.
Oh, they did?
So they thought their status.
I didn't know that.
They acknowledged them as being in the majors, not the minor.
So, ye shall know the truth. This is what the word of our Lord, our God, Jehovah said. Ye shall know the truth. And the truth is going to do what? It's going to make you free. It's not going to ask you to be free. It's going to make you. When something makes you, that means it's insisting that you be free, even if you don't want to be free. When Jackie Robinson broke those ranks, they were made. Whenever new levels of equity came into being, it wasn't that it came along nicely, it was made. So why take all these years to now acknowledge it? Again, the deliberate suggestion was to make it appear that those, for certain groups of people, you are incapable, you are inferior. And for you to then automatically, that to be your response expectancy. When you see it, when you see them, you ought to expect that they are better than you automatically without any proof. But Satchel Paige, I ain't hearing that. Jesse Owens, I ain't hearing that. Now, I'm pointing out the obvious situations so that you can understand what I'm about to say to you. Go with Ephesians 6. See, Rick, as you turn, we must understand that these response expectancies, they set us up for automatic responses. In other words, not only do they set adults up for automatic responses, they set our young adults up for automatic responses. They set our youth up for automatic responses. They set our children up for automatic responses. Once we anticipate a specific outcome will occur, before it even happens, once we anticipate a particular outcome is going to occur, our subsequent thoughts about that thing, our subsequent behavior about that thing will actually help bring us the outcome of that fruition. It's going to actually bring us the outcome of whatever our thoughts are. So if we automatically, think about it, if we anticipate a specific outcome is going to occur, well, I know I'll never be able to make an A in that subject. If we anticipate that we are never going to, because of the deliberate suggestions that's been put in place, if we accept that limitation, what we in effect are doing is demonstrating faith in failure before we actually even try. Where did that come from? It comes from deliberate suggestions about that are being put in front of people by the wolves in the community, by the people who don't share your ethics, values, and character, who want to keep their foot on your neck, who want you to be subservient to them, who don't believe that you are equal to them, who believe that you, in fact, are beneath them for the wrong reasons. And what happens? The truth emerges and makes everybody free. You just told me the truth emerged this week from the National Baseball Association. I didn't know that. But the truth emerged this week. And the truth was they should have, what? Recognized them all along. Isn't that right? Is that the truth? Do you believe that that's the truth? Yeah, that's the truth. But what prevented it from happening? These wolves in sheep's clothing.
Oh, praise be to God, from whom all blessings flow. It is our prayer at Clay Family Ministries that your life has been increased with the increase of God through this study. We appreciate and are thankful for your fellowship during this life skills study segment.